Hi, I'm Rebecca Fredericks and welcome to RebeccaFredericks.com, the place to be for your personal and professional success. Today's episode is about how not to overreact when you think he's done something wrong. Now, we are all guilty of this. Come on, admit it. He's 20 minutes late for your date and he hasn't texted or called and you get annoyed. It's just a natural reaction. You start imagining that he's forgotten and then jump to the conclusion that the reason he's forgotten is that he doesn't really like you, or he takes 4 hours to reply to your text and the reason must be because he's out with another girl and having way too much of a good time to bother replying. There's always something. And sometimes our jumped to conclusions are spot on, but sometimes they are wildly inaccurate. And when they're wildly inaccurate, not only do they make us miserable thinking about and dwelling on them for no reason, but they make us look like mad, needy, bunny boilery losers. And no one wants to look like a mad, needy, bunny boilery loser, especially not in front of a guy we like. So what can we do about it? Well, today I want to teach you about 2 different techniques that you can use to get the situation back into perspective, calm you down, and stop you overreacting until you know what's really happened. And the technique is called cognitive reframing. Now, cognitive reframing is a really useful tool to use in life, and especially in relationships. It basically involves changing the way you view ideas, events, and situations by trying to find alternative, more healthy options. There are always many sides to every story, as the old cliche goes. And as with stories, we all have a different perspective on a situation, depending on what's called our internal processing filters. What something means will be different depending upon the person who sees the event and how they choose to interpret it. What this thing or situation means to that person will also be different depending upon the context of the event. If you change the context or content of an event, you will also change the meaning. So there are 2 different types of cognitive reframing, and these are context reframing and content reframing. Let's take these in turn, and firstly we'll start with context reframing. Neurolinguistic programming believes that every behavior is useful in some situation. So by thinking of a useful context, you can change your response to that behavior, because in this new context, the behavior can also be interpreted as good, not bad. Now, the trick of the context reframe is to ask yourself when this behavior would in fact be useful, because all behaviors are useful in some context or another. Let's take an example. Let's say that your boyfriend isn't replying to your phone calls. You've tried to reach him 3 times and he lets the phone ring out and then never calls you back. Now, you could assume that he's annoyed with you. So the reason he isn't calling you back is that he's upset with you. Or you could assume that he's seeing someone else, so he can't pick up the phone. Now, both of these assumptions are going to make you pretty unhappy, stressed, and anxious. However, if you change the context, the meaning of this behavior also changes. So if the reason he isn't calling you back is because he's in an important client meeting with his phone on silent, suddenly he isn't not calling you back, he doesn't even know that you've called, and he isn't annoyed with you, he's just busy. Because the context determines the meaning of a behavior, this is actually a really simple thing to do, which can save you from making yourself feel terrible and making you come across as the aforementioned mad, needy, bunny boilery loser. So the next time you find yourself assuming and jumping to conclusions, have a think about the context. In what context could the behavior actually be fine and not horrible or worrying or inconsiderate? So now let's look at how to do a context reframe. And you can do a context reframe really easily. You simply need to ask yourself, in what context or situation can this behavior be positive or useful? Now, I've set an exercise to help you practice this new technique, and we'll get to that at the end of the episode. Now let's look at the second cognitive reframing technique of the day, and that is content reframing. Now, with content reframing, the assumption is that all behavior has a positive intention. Most people don't want to hurt others. They may hurt others with their words or behaviors, but it's unlikely that that's their main intent. And even if that other person's intention is to hurt or harm others, their intention for themselves is still positive. So their intention is to feel safe or powerful or in control or prevent that person doing something again or anything like that. So content reframing is about finding the positive intention of a behavior. So the content or meaning of a situation is determined by what you choose to focus on. Therefore, the same behavior or situation can have good or bad meanings. However, generally, we're conditioned to interpret events negatively if we can. So we look for the danger and the threats. And this is because of our reptilian brains. They've developed to protect us and keep us alive. And they do this by constantly looking for the danger and threat in every situation. So our subconscious is primed to look for reasons as to why a behavior or situation may be bad. However, we no longer live in a dangerous and threatening world. Our reptilian brain developed in the way it did at a time when our lives were very different. We don't need to constantly be on the outlook for predators in order to stay alive. This means that we can consciously decide not to let our reptilian brains interpret behaviors and situations for us. You can take control over this process so that you are creating the best interpretations for yourself. Understanding that there is always a positive intention to a behavior helps us to interpret that behavior positively and therefore put ourselves into a positive state to create positive results. So, for example, imagine that your partner has started to criticize you. So the way you load the dishwasher, the way you're always texting during dinner, etc., etc. You could interpret this behavior as your partner going off you, of you being annoying to him or him falling out of love with you. Alternatively, if every behavior has a positive intention, you could interpret his behavior as trying to be helpful and give you advice, which, let's face it, men do like to do. With this reframe, you could choose to interpret his behaviors as him feeling insecure in the relationship, so wanting to be helpful and wanting your undivided attention over mealtimes together. And with this interpretation, it is likely that you'll behave and react very differently to him and be more loving and understanding of him rather than less. And this is likely to help and strengthen the relationship too. So now let's look at how to do a content reframe. And you can do a content reframe by simply asking yourself the questions, what else could this mean? Or in what ways could this be positive? Now, we all use cognitive reframing every day without even realizing it. In fact, we've been brought up to use and understand the principles of reframing. Think of fairy tales. When a frame changes, so too does the meaning. Look at Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. In a normal life, he's a bit of a freak, but suddenly Father Christmas needs some light to guide his sleigh, and Rudolph's nose becomes the savior of the day. Something that was embarrassing for him suddenly becomes his most prized possession because the context changed. Reframing is a really useful tool that can help you to look at a situation from a different point of view. Reframing is a tool that you should use when you find yourself jumping to negative conclusions and getting into an unresourceful state. Now you know how to reframe, start using this tool in your everyday life. Okay, let's look at the exercises I've set for you today. Your first exercise is on context reframing. I want you to look at the 4 sentences in the exercise blueprint over at rebeccafredericks.com, and I want you to reframe the meaning of them by changing the context. Now these sentences are: 1. You're on the tube and some children are running riot. The father is looking on passively and not doing anything to try and control or calm them down. 2. Your daughter is incredibly headstrong and won't listen to a word you say. 3. You tell one of your staff that they really need to redo a presentation and they burst into tears and run out of the office. And 4. You're annoyed that your boyfriend has invited the weird guy from the office over for dinner next Saturday night. So to do this, you need to ask yourself, in what context or situation can this behavior be positive or useful? And your second exercise is on content reframing. I want you to look at the second set of 4 sentences that I've put in the exercise blueprint, and I want you to reframe the meaning of them with the presupposition that all behavior has a positive intention. Now, the sentences for this exercise are: 1, your husband hasn't called you all day. 2, your boss hasn't replied to your email about a pay rise. 3, your best friend didn't invite you to the last girly lunch. And 4, your colleague keeps criticizing your work. Now, practice using these techniques in your relationship. See how they can really help to calm you down, stop you from jumping to negative conclusions, and make your relationship more stable and more secure. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Please let us know your answers from today's exercises. We would love to hear from you. If you've liked this episode, then please like it on Facebook, please like it below, and share it with any of your friends that you think may be interested. Today's tweet is: think of every behavior as having a positive intention. That way you'll not get upset with anyone. As always, remember that you are in control of your own life. If you want something to happen, you have to go out there and make the changes. That's not to say that others can't support you and help you. That is why I'm here, and that is what your friends and family are for. You have all the power that you will ever need inside yourself. So use it and create a life and a future that you love. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and thank you for listening in on my Friday tip. I'll see you next Friday.